Notice how we saw even in Lamentations where loving kindness and compassion were linked. It's called a hendiades. You'll see work linked often together. And they're intended to be used together to kind of promote this collective sense of these two words that do have distinct meaning, but they're running buddies. You know, they're cousins, they're besties, and you'll see them a bunch. So this key biblical term, it might be, maybe glory is the most conceptual. This could be the most earthy, and it also reveals a conceptuality or conceptualness that might be very helpful. It comes from the root word rachim in Hebrew, which is the word for the woman's womb, okay? The physical womb, okay? And then it has a plural attached to it, which is our word rachamim, okay? Now, when we think of plurals in our language, I think every time we would think of more than one, okay? I have a phone. If I had another phone, I would say, see these two phones. And I would indicate that I have more than one by adding the prefix s or the suffix s. In Hebrew, you could do that and clarify that it's more than one, but a ton of the time, it references to the intensification or the fullness of something. Eloi is the root word for God, Elohim. I don't really think he's indicating the Trinity in Genesis 1. I think he's showing this is the fullness of God that is the subject of this revelation, okay? Remember, the Bible's a book about God, and let me show you in his fullness, and that full expression is Elohim, not just Eloi, okay? The same idea here would be singular, womb. Now it moves to wombs, so I don't want you having visions of a bunch of wombs going around your head. The idea of the full expression of the womb. So it's going to be more, hang with me, it's going to be more than just the place where the baby was housed, okay? Although that's a part of it, it's going to be more than just that, okay? What's the full expression of the womb we're going to see? This one does have a Greek equivalent, splagnon, translated compassion, or if you're old King Jameser, bowels. We'll talk about that word here in a moment. Got you back, Allie. All right, welcome back. We've talking about temple prostitutes and bowels now here in our time together. That will show up here in about 10 minutes, so hang with me, okay? It's a different concept than you might be thinking, so hang with me. This is the word that's translated compassion, this idea of the more than one womb. This idea of one womb now with the plural, okay, this idea of wombs is the fullness of the womb, the full expression of the womb. It almost always includes a desire to aid distress, because now it's going to marry not only that which came from my womb, but also the place, and men have wombs too in this aspect, the place where I feel things like compassion, okay? We saw that with liver. Remember the king of Babylon made the decision at his liver level, at his gut. We have the three different ways that different cultures think or express: cerebral, heart, kind of gut. This is going to be more of that gut idea. It is a tender feeling of mercy, but almost all the time the word is accompanied with action, okay? So that, like we're going to see in about 30 minutes, that you're not really praising the Lord by simply saying hallelujah. You have to actually say some things about God out loud in front of others. Here, the idea of true compassion is, it does have a feeling, but it is accompanied with an action that aids the distress, okay? This gut ache for another. And here's sort of why I think it's the most conceptual term that we studied and will study. This tender feeling from your womb for someone from your womb. Now, mamas get this in a heartbeat, okay? That tender feeling they have for their child, because their child literally was in their womb, and now that place of tender, and that's also the place where tender feelings come forth for that person that came from their womb, okay? But we're going to see here in a moment, Joseph, his womb will grow warm. Now, if we did a MRI of Joseph, he probably doesn't actually have a womb, but he does have a central nervous system, and that's where he felt tenderness for his brothers. In his life, those were the closest, pardon the pun, womb mates that he had, okay? That there is a friend that's closer than a brother kind of thing in the Proverbs. That very tender, tight bud relationship could be a womb type of relationship, whether the womb was literally shared or not. Is Alyssa not in the room for this, Michael? Holy moly. She's a triplet. This would have been great. She would have told us all things about womb mates, but you can't get her insights. So do you sort of see does it have a physical component to it? Yes, but this is a highly, highly figurative concept, okay, that's dealing with things like feelings and rendering aid to those that need their distress relieved. I'm just going to use the operative term womb love to sort of help us think this through for a second, okay? So here's some examples. As you might imagine, the word is used literally, like we saw with glory, to describe things that are literally heavy. The Bible every once in a while talks about the literal womb, the place where children are housed. Now, the Lord saw that Leah was unloved, and he opened her womb. He gave her ability to conceive and hold a child and then give birth. But Rachel, the opposite, did not have her womb open, talking about the ability to conceive, the ability to issue birth, okay? Hannah, same thing, was given in 1 Samuel 1. Hannah was given a double portion, for he loved Hannah, but the Lord had closed her womb, okay? She was not able. So it shows up, as we might imagine, sort of the regular word, but also the idea is going to quickly move into this idea of expressing feelings. Now here's Joseph, a male who at the end of Genesis 40 has been sent ahead by God, although Joseph doesn't really know all that. Certainly the family doesn't know it, to be incorporated in Egyptian culture, to really, Genesis 50 is a great example here, that he was sent forth to preserve many people alive, that what you meant for evil, God meant for good, that famous line. But now the brothers come, because the famine has happened in Judah, and they have to go down to Egypt for food. And Joseph's been down there, storing up grain, 7 years worth, as I recall, and they've come to partake in his foresightfulness. And the brothers show up, and Joseph is sort of dressed in Italian garb. He's got makeup on, most likely, which was normal for Egyptian officials. And it appeared they didn't recognize who he was. And yet he recognized them, of course, because they were in their regular clothes that he would have worn. So Joseph hurries out of that room, for he was deeply stirred, in this case over Benjamin, over his brother, and he sought a place to weep. And he entered his chamber and wept there. Literally, what comes across as deeply stirred in English is his womb grew warm. Rakamim, and then the word for warm. His womb turned over. He had a tender feeling in his gut for his long estranged brother. So it's not limited to ladies. We'll see here that dads are going to be participative here in a moment. The term is used in Hosea as a prophecy against the nation of Israel for their lack of compassion. Often prophets' kids were told to have their names changed, probably not really, but as a symbol for what God was viewing in and among the nation. He's going to do that with Isaiah. He's going to do it here with Hosea and Hosea's kids. She conceives again and gave birth to a daughter, and the Lord said to him, being Hosea, name her Lo Ruchama. Lo in Hebrew means no. Ruchama. Name her no compassion, for I will no longer have compassion. There's the connection. So in Hebrew, it would read, name her Lo Ruchama, for I will no longer have Rakamim on the house of Israel. Their time of selfishness, their time of independence, their time of idolatry was up. And God, using the Deuteronomy 28 formula, had basically said, I've given you all these opportunities to turn over centuries and centuries of times. For me to be true to my hesed to you and my loyalty to you, I must allow you to undergo discipline. So that time has now come. No longer will you have the opportunity to have my compassion because of your behavior. Now, His grace will bring them back in a sense, but at this point he is withholding their compassion. But I will have compassion on the house of Judah, the 2 tribes to the south, for they were behaving more correctly. Just how God kind of evaluates, in this case, a nation. But a nation is nothing more than a bunch of individuals. It was an uncompassionate, incompassionate nation, okay? Not caring for others. Same idea in Hosea, the marriage metaphor, that God in essence marries Israel. I will betroth you to me forever. Yes, I will betroth you to me in righteousness, there's tzedakah, and in justice, that's mishpat, another word, in loving kindness, chesed, and in rachamim. These are the notes of the song, guys. These are just the terms that God uses over and over and over again. Those of you that play music, you will see some of the greatest music that you love captures 3 or 4 notes just in different arrangements. Country music's built on the famous line, 3 notes, or 3 chords in the truth. You know, just some combination of the common notes in which are arranged in a way that's particularly pleasing to you. God uses these same words the same way. Loving kindness, truth, righteousness, justice, rachamim, compassion. That is him as a husband, by the way. That's what he's saying. That's what I'll bring to the marriage. I'll make sure we meet the standards of righteousness. We'll be fair to one another, be loyal to you, and compassionate out of my womb. And here in this case, God has a womb. David, after his sin with Bathsheba, it properly incorporates words we've already studied in order to properly be forgiven. Because David had committed what's known as the sin of the high hand. He deserved death. His sin with Bathsheba was technically unforgivable. Yet David, who we saw when the child died, said, who knows, God may be gracious. Notice his first appeal. He's a lawyer appealing for his case, and he does not, like Job did, demand justice. He asks for grace. He's a wise man. You don't want to get in a courtroom duke out with God, okay? It's a poor, poor legal theory, okay? Rather ask for something I don't deserve. Treat me for nothing. Treat me for nothing I have done. Treat me undeservedly. For I have earned your wrath. Give me the opposite of that. Be gracious to me according to your loving kindness. Well, how deep is God's loving kindness? Let's just use the word infinite, okay? However deep loving kindness is to me, give me the same measure of grace. That's what he means by that, according, okay? However loving kind God is, I'll take that same measure of grace. In fact, I'll take a heaping, helping portions of both grace and loving kindness. He's calling God's loyalty to the deal, because God had said, I'll be true to the deal. And David is wanting to preserve the relationship, but realize I don't have a leg to stand on legally. He doesn't call for righteousness here, he calls for grace. He doesn't want to go against the standard, for the standard would have condemned him. Give me what I don't deserve in the context of the relationship that we have. According to the greatness of your compassion, rachamim, blot out my transgressions. I wish this was hata, but it's not. It's another word. But notice even in English, trans, to go across, the idea of transgression, I've crossed the line. Inequity, I've not been equal to the standard. Hata, I've veered off or missed, fallen short of the standard. So they're synonyms that all convey the same idea. Here are the daddies. We have wombs too, apparently. As Psalm 103, verse 13 says, just as a father has compassion on his children, so the Lord has compassion on those who fear him. This idea of that tender, womb-like mercy from a dad to a kid who knows the kid well, who's seen him in some tough times, picks him up, cleans him up, dusts him off. Let's get back in the game. Notice for those who fear him. Elsewhere it says for those who draw near. If you grew up, and I taught for years at the College of Biblical Studies, which was 60% African Americans, and there was among the 60% that were African Americans, 95% grew up in the King James Bible and routinely brought King James Bibles to class. So it did me no good with my nice Hebrew degree from Dallas Seminary to pop in there with my New American Standard Bible if they were reading a Bible that said different things. So I had to be aware, like I do now with college students who use the ESV, or when I was in seminary, the NIV got really popular. After seminary, I had to get very familiar with the King James because, like you, they're going to say, well, my Bible says this, and I got to have an answer for that. And that's where word studies can be very helpful. So if you're a King Jameser, or your mama was, or your grandma certainly was, this is what they would have read. They would have read verses like, but whoso hath the world's goods, and seeth his brother have need, and shutteth up his bowels of compassion, from him how dwelleth the love of God in him. Okay? The bowels of compassion is that word splagnon. That same exact idea of rakamim brought over into Greek, because that is the place from which the tender feelings come. And that's what the word meant in 1611 when King James authorized the writing of the King James Bible. Bowels has taken on a different connotation now, but it was the place of tender feelings. Yet the irony of to have, in essence, spiritual constipation here, shutteth up the bowels of compassion, cannot be overlooked if you've got a sense of humor at all, okay? You'll see it in many other places, and I think I listed several of the phrases. It shows up like 10 or 15 times in the New Testament, but in the King James, but almost always rendered mercy or compassion for us. Great word, great conceptual idea of a term from a normal, everyday thing, places where babies live for a while before they're born, now takes on that larger idea of this is also the place where the feelings for that baby comes from. And it can be used of God, it can be used of dads, it can be used of moms, it can be used of non-moms, because we all have those opportunities to aid one in distress and to be integral to the senses that our body is really, it's really a head-heart connection or a head-gut connection that's going on when you see an infirmed situation, a situation requiring distress, or that causing distress, and how I can help alleviate that, and how I can fight against a little bit of just feeling bad and then flipping the channel, okay? If we flip the channel, let's don't at least say, I was compassionate, okay? Now go back and study Jesus, and every time he was compassionate. Study the priest in the Samaritan in John 4. Study those that exhibit compassion and the actions that accompany that emotion.